What's good, Skate Athletics fam? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to talk about your hip pain, what the potential causes might be, and I'm going to show you some exercises that could help fix this issue. Just like most fitness topics out there, there's a ton of information about hip impingement pain. It often gets quite confusing and leaves you feeling like you either have to pay for some expensive program or that you have to get surgery to fix the issue. So that's what this video is for. I'm going to try to explain why you might be experiencing hip pain, and as I said, I'm going to show you some exercises that I use on myself and many of my clients to relieve their hip pain. I must say, if someone's trying to tell you that they know exactly the cause of their hip pain and they have the perfect 3 exercises that are going to help, I guarantee in a broad sense, they're wrong. Those exercises won't help everyone and every type of hip impingement pain. Why? Because the hip is extremely complex, and if you want to correct your pain, it's going to require you to do some work. If you've been dealing with some severe hip pain for quite some time now, please consider going to an orthopedic specialist or a physical therapist. Injuries to the hip that are left untreated are a common cause of arthritis down the road. Well, broadly speaking, it is when proximal femur and the acetabular rim start to jam together and come in contact with one another, which commonly occurs during hip flexion if your hip is stuck in an internally rotated or externally rotated position due to a variety of different factors. If you want to get specific, there are a bunch of different types of hip impingements. And as we said before, there might be a variety of different reasons why you might be experiencing pain. If you want to do some reading yourself, I'll provide some good links in the description below. The hip is extremely complex, and it takes a lot of effort and a hell of a lot of consistency to actually fix your hip pain for good. So if you don't see instant results today or even in a couple weeks, please stay patient. Keep trying to identify the root cause of the issue and stay consistent if you find something that works. Trust me, a little bit of mobility and stretching, roughly 3 to 4 times a week, coupled with the right exercises, can go a long way. And obviously just remember, the less pain you're in, the more time you'll be able to spend on your board. The outline to your treatment plan is pretty simple. First, we will do our best to identify the root cause of the issue. Is it a joint tightness issue? Is it a stability/strength issue? Or could it be something worse? Second, we will identify and prioritize the exercises and stretches that are necessary to help alleviate this pain and ultimately fix the issue. Lastly, we'll reinforce our understanding of proper movement mechanics on and off the board to ensure that this issue doesn't just immediately come back after stopping a rehab program. Okay, to get us started, I highly recommend you perform a couple tests. First, we have the flexion, adduction, and internal rotation test. Lie down and have a homie flex your leg towards your chest slowly, like so. When you have hit that end range of motion of hip flexion, have him internally rotate your femur, then slowly adduct the leg towards the center of your body, like so. Go through this range of motion a couple times and note any pain and when and where you experience the pain. If you experience pain or a pinching sensation in the front of the hip when doing this, you most likely need to work on some joint flexibility or some joint mobility. If you are feeling a pain near your groin deep in the hip, you may have degeneration, fraying, or a potentially torn labrum. If this is the case, I highly recommend going to see an orthopedic specialist. Next, we're going to perform the flexion, abduction, and external rotation test. Place your ankle just above your knee joint, making this figure 4 position. Have your homie lightly press down on your knee while keeping the other hip in the same position. What we're looking for is a general lack of range of motion or feelings of pain. If you're experiencing extreme tightness, aka your knee's not able to get roughly 6 inches off the floor, or if you're experiencing pain in this position, then once again, we could potentially be dealing with an external rotation mobility or flexibility issue. Third, we have the bodyweight deep squat. This is going to kind of serve as a combination strength/mobility assessment. If you're unable to squat past 90 degrees comfortably while maintaining a neutral pelvis with your knees out, chest up, then there's something breaking down in your kinetic chain. This could be related to a joint mobility issue, as we've already talked about, aka lack of ankle dorsiflexion/hip abduction, or this could be a strength/stability issue. Simply, you may not have the neuromuscular control or the muscular strength to maintain proper joint mechanics throughout this dynamic range of motion. If either of these are the case, I highly recommend you taking some time to optimize your bodyweight squat. Why? Because it requires you to master proper joint and movement mechanics, which will 100% translate to your skating. If your squat looks like any of these examples, please note you may have a strength/stability issue. For your last assessment, I'd like you just to reflect back on your training history. The question really is, are you strong enough? And I'm not asking how much can you squat. I'm talking about, once again, do you have the functional strength to maintain proper joint mechanics during dynamic ranges of motion, such as when you're doing a skate trick. If femur is stuck in an internally rotated position and you haven't mastered the hip hinge, then anytime you do a trick that requires a powerful pop, you're jamming your femoral head into your hip joint over and over again. And obviously, over time, this can lead to inflammation, pain, labral tears, and ultimately, as we discussed, arthritis. So if you're not able to control your body weight squat while maintaining proper joint mechanics, and or our mechanics drastically break down when we're prepping for a skate trick, then we got some strength to work on. I always will encourage athletes to work on their loaded squats, split squats, and deadlift variations. If this isn't for you, of course there's other ways. Plyometric style exercises, and of course other styles of training such as Pilates, yoga, whatever, can definitely help. Later on in this video, we'll get into those specific exercises. The next component of hip impingement, which I think is rarely discussed, is your neuromuscular control. It genuinely takes mental effort to maintain proper hip positions when performing a dynamic movement such as a squat or any skate trick. At first, you really have to concentrate about externally rotating your femur to the correct position and hinging enough at the hips to make sure your pelvis maintains a neutral position to ultimately keep your chest directly above the board. But with consistent, diligent practice, eventually you'll be able to do all this without even thinking about it. Real quick, I feel like we need to take a quick step back to review exactly how the hip moves. Take a look at this animation from muscle in motion. Notice how the femur is moving when Fred goes into a squat. Now look at this generic hip animation. The femur doesn't travel straight forward. If it did, it would jam directly into the hip joint. This is where the importance of external rotation and abduction during your skate tricks comes into play. If you're not thinking about these movement mechanics when you go skate, then ultimately you're going to be working towards a very tight and an impinged hip. Now, of course, you're not going to look like this before you pop a kickflip, but we can bring some awareness to correct body mechanics when doing/landing any skate trick. I think the easiest way we can think about this is essentially we're just trying to eliminate any excessive knee valgus, which just means try not to let your knees cave in drastically before you pop a trick or when you're landing a trick. Of course, take this with a grain of salt. There's a bunch of tricks that actually require this internal rotation, such as feebles or Smith grinds. But in general, apply these proper movement mechanics when possible. When you're warming up, keep this in mind. And if you're doing tricks down a stair set and you feel like you're in full control, give this a try. I'm not trying to change your stance or way of skating, rather just trying to bring some awareness to proper body mechanics to just help prevent a gnarly hip impingement down the road. Now, let's discuss what exercises I recommend to help your hips stay pain-free. For time purposes, I'm not going to walk through any of these exercises in this video. However, I have walked through a bunch of these in previous videos, and I'll do my best to tag those as they pop up. So based on your previous assessments, if you're dealing with hip mobility/tightness issues, I recommend trying out some of these exercises. First, start with the general glute/piriformis and external rotator stretch. A couple that I recommend are the elevated pigeon or the lying figure 4 stretch. Second, we have a deep lunge with internal and external rotation. This is also known as the banded hip distraction, commonly seen on Squat University's page. The band definitely helps, but you can definitely do this without. Lastly, we have the couch stretch, and then incorporating the Psoas reach. All three of these mobility exercise variations can be seen in these two videos. If you're dealing with what seems to be more of like a strength/stability problem, then let's try these exercises. Number one, we have mini band internal and external rotations. This could be used as a great warm-up to number one, warm up the muscles obviously, but also that muscle-mind connection. Second, we have side plank clamshells. These are great for skaters because not only do they work on hip stability and strength, but also core stability. Third, we have the hip airplane. Hip airplanes are awesome. They're really gonna help you understand how to control internal rotation and then that external rotation using the glutes. Fourth, we have the Superband across chest hip hinge. This exercise is my absolute favorite for teaching individuals how to correctly hip hinge while keeping their shoulders in that proper position. And number five, we have split squats. Use any split squat variation you like. All these will be a great tool to work on your single leg strength, balance, and control. One of the most important things I just need you to think about when doing these exercises is that obviously you're not experiencing that same hip pain. If you're still experiencing that same pinching sensation at the front of the hip or pain on the lateral side, make sure you really focus on those movement mechanics. Make sure you're hinging enough, make sure you're externally rotating and abducting enough. And if you don't have anyone to help you out, please take a video, send it to me, and I'll give you some feedback. Mastering these exercises, of course, is not going to be the end-all be-all to your hip pain. Remember, these exercises are here to reinforce proper movement mechanics to ensure that you're using the correct muscles while exercising, and most importantly, skateboarding. What most likely got us here in the first place is poor movement mechanics coupled with strength/mobility issues. And as we said before, changing your movement patterns is a very long and difficult process. This will require you to experiment with different exercises and stretches to really pinpoint what works for you. Trust me, it's going to be worth it if you don't want to be skating with pain. I really hope this video provides you with some good information and helps shape your rehab program. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below or feel free to shoot me a DM on my Instagram. And as always, if you like this video, please hit that like button down below and subscribe if you haven't already. All right, fam, catch you next time on Skate Athletics.